Attention. Welcome to the Different Spectrums podcast. We dive into the wild world of mental health discussions. Get ready for profound talks, a sprinkle of humor and sarcasm, and a touch of colorful language. Just a quick heads up, our show reflects our individual opinions, which may not align with the standpoint of the podcast, our featured guests, or any related corporate entities. Our mission? To illuminate through laughter and satire because everyone needs a good chuckle. Chill out and don't stress over the small stuff. Legal troubles? No, thank you. Cancel culture? Please spare us. We'd rather keep this space lawsuit free. So buckle up, have a good time, and join us as we navigate the vibrant realm of mental health on the Different Spectrums podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. By using our link, you can get 10% off your first month of therapy. So, Naz, as a therapist on BetterHelp, what has your experience been like?
I've been doing it since January 2021, and it's been really fun and exciting. I've been able to reach clients all over the United States and the world. I've had good relationships. I've had folks that I've had for a couple months and a good handful where I've had for almost 2 years now. So it's magnificent. I've enjoyed my time and my clients. I love them.
Awesome. You can do it all from your phone or computer via phone call, video chat, or messaging, however you feel the most comfortable. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/DSP or choose Different Spectrums podcast during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month. All right. Hey, everybody, we back again.
Hey, we're back. We're live.
I'm Spencer. Of course, we have our licensed clinical therapist, Naz.
Yeah, I'm the Yoda of the doctors, Dr. Yoda Nas.
Yeah, that'll stick. Okay. Remember, don't take us too seriously.
Or do. That's completely up to you.
There we go. Also, don't forget to run up those likes for us. We'd really appreciate it. So, before we get into the movie that we're doing today, we have a special guest. She is a licensed psychologist, trauma-informed yoga teacher, EMDR and hypnosis trained. Also, she is the founder and owner of Noor Therapy and Wellness. Please welcome Pauline Yeghnazar Peck to the show.
Hi, everybody.
Woo!
Hello, Governor.
Hello.
Happy to be here.
Yes. Welcome. We're glad to have you. And we're excited to get into this movie and topics for today. So, the movie that we're covering is called The Persian Version, right? And some things that we're going to be talking about is the disconnect from our parents and what does it mean to really be a parent, and kind of the cultural differences that kind of go into that, right? So those are a few of the things that we're going to be covering, but I think it's going to be a great pod. So, Naz, anything before we get into the show?
Yep, this will be the official trigger warning. I'm not sure who owns the rights to the movie because this isn't a Netflix production, but since it's on Netflix, I should be able to get most of it passed. But if not, it'll just be the audio, which is fine. But just as a heads up, right, there's some tough scenes in here. So we will be witnessing a stillbirth. And then we're going to talk about some of the emotions, some of the effects. We're going to see some other messed up stuff too in there. So we're going to talk about anxiety, depression, suicidality, and how that can affect the relationship between you and your kid, that generational trauma. And that's why, right, we got Dr. Peck on talking about this is, being trauma informed, understanding that your parents got stuff too. And so there's a lot to get into. And I'm excited.
I'm going to add one other trigger warning of infidelity because I've worked with a lot of couples and, that can be really tough. If you're healing from that, just having a scene where that's going to be a topic can bring up a lot. So I'm going to add that one to the mix too.
There you go. So we're going to do our best to be extremely respectful because these are some tough scenes, but me and Spence will be out of pocket here and there because life is too hard to it's just too miserable to not laugh. And so we're still going to have some funny bits here and there. I always got the funny bits,
You sure do.
You
sure
do, All right, everyone. Let's get into it. Whoop whoop.
Whoop whoop.
Whoop, whoop.
Hey,
Hey.
you know,
She's seen a show. She's seen a show or two.
it's just every woman of color can do it. You know, as soon as we get to any YT folk, they're like, who?
What?
Huh?
Huh?
Oh, you people and your colloquiums. You're one of the good ones. All right, I'm done. I'm sorry. Let's get into the show.
All right, let's get to the show.
Did you know that we do that as a thing, or did you just go with us?
I just went with it. It was like
Hey,
1, 2.
you know
I don't want to be left out. I'm not trying to be left out of this.
So often white folk will be like,
Was something supposed to happen
what
here?
are those coloreds doing?
Oh my God.
سوالی هم داشتی راجع به حاملگی یا جلوگیری از حاملگی. خجالت نکش. بین خودمون میمونم.
دلم میخواست درسم رو ادامه بده.
خب هنوزم میتونی.
نه دیگه چه خبره؟ دیره.
من 30 سالم بود برگشتم مدرسه. برای من که دیر نبود.
چند سالتون شما حالا؟
36.
ماشاءالله از مامانم بزرگتر است.
حالا دیدی؟ هیچ وقت دیر نیست.
خوش آمدی.
یه کوزه کوچیک شیر میخوام با 3 تا تخم مرغ.
ده 3 دلیل که بو آمده.
درسته.
شکمت خیلی بالاست. بچه دختر میشه یقینا.
جدا. باور نمی‌کنی چه از شیراز تغییر کرده. اصلا رفتم اونجا فکر نمی‌کردم شیراز باشه. می‌بینی چقدر شیراز بزرگ شده؟ بچه‌ها زود بزرگ میشن نگه نه.
باید برم. شب برمیگردم.
رویا جون
امروز و فردام تو هستی رفتی و قلبمو شکستی امروز و فردام تو هستی رفتی و قلبمو شکستی
رویا رو جدیدن ندیدین؟
توف باروش بیاد.
چرا؟
تو خودت جواهری شیرین خانم گیان. اون عفریتم بخواد لکه دارت کنه نمیتونه. انقدر که تو پاکی. ماشاءالله چقدر ماهی.
نمی بخوابی؟
باید برم. مریض دارم.
بهت میدم یه روز با هم دیگه برقصیم. استغفرالله توبه. من میتونم قوی باشم. من خودم قوی میکنم. میتونم قوی باشم. برمیگردم. رفته دارم میرم
دارش مواظبش هستم. سفر خوبی داشته باشی. احتیاط کن توی سفر.
اصلا اینقدر دوریم که نمیتونیم برگردیم.
نه تو چی به آقا خانم دکتر؟
من خوبم. بریم فقط برسیم به اتوبوس.
لگنش خیلی باریکه. دیگه برای سزارین دیره. بچه سر و ته شده. باید کمکم کنی. باشه. زور بزن. بیشتر. جیغ محکم‌تر. دخترم.
ببینمش.
بچه را دست دادیم.
خدا قشنگه مامانی. آرزو اسم تو آرزو عشق مامان. شیرین جون بس. برش به من. برش دیگه. مهدیس جون ببرش. میتونی دخترم باید سیف پروپاش داشت.
شرمنده‌تم شیرین. منو ببخش.
وقت چرا باید این کار بکنه؟
به خاطر پسرت. به خاطر شیواز.
بس کن.
قولت میدم میبرمتون یه جوی دور از اینجا، دور از هرچی حرفه. میریم آمریکا، ولی من به کمک نیاز دارم.
چی؟
اسمش وحیده.
چی؟
رویا سرزا رفت.
دیگه هرگز اسم اون رو جلوی من نمیاری. حالیته؟
وحید مادر میخواد. لب به شیر خوش نمیزن.
تو روت میشه اینو از من بخوای؟ این شیر دخترمه.
شیرین این بچه بیگناهه. تفلک تلف میشه، رانش بکن.
همیشه دلم یه دختر میخواست که محرم رازم باشه. آخرش یه روز خیلی خیلی سال بعد و روز سیاه من دختر رو به دنیا آوردم. ولی وقتی که بزرگ شد یه چی عجیبی پیش اومد. من دیگه نتونستم حرفمو بزنم. وقتی پیشم بود من همیشه ساکت بودم. باید ساکت میبودم. سکوتم قوتم بود. تنها راهی بود که میتونستم قصه خودم باشون بسازم. راه درمان همه دردام بود که یه جوریه ازشون درمون بمونم.
I inherited that from my mother. The strength of silence. Pain can't touch you if you don't talk about it. Right?
So sorry. I'm so sorry I'm late.
Oh, great. The sperm donor's here. We can start now.
I'm Max. I'm not the sperm donor. We're dating. Well, we're not dating. It's complicated. So,
can we begin?
Yes, of course.
Sit down, please.
Can I help you?
Have any positive problems?
Yeah, okay.
The head size is normal. Tangent limbs and feet are normal. Most importantly is heart. Heart is looking normal.
Wow. Wow, this is totally amazing. I was thinking, what if we kept dating?
Were we dating? I thought we just fucked once.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most awkward thing, right? Now the sexual tension's out of the way, we can actually go on a date and find out if we like each other. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's worth a try, right? Do you like dumplings?
I mean, who doesn't like dumplings?
I like dumplings.
Yeah. I mean, oh my God, that's amazing. Well, I'm kind of a big deal in the dumpling scene. It's kind of embarrassing, but I'm the dumpling king.
The dumpling king?
Yeah, dumpling king.
Is self-proclaimed or they named you the dumpling?
No. There's a guy. He plays a trumpet for me every time I come in the shop.
Really?
Yeah, I get everything for free.
I really believe that.
It's truth. No, you can't have sushi. Sorry, Layla. It's like I read a thing. It's World Health.
Japanese people eat sushi when they're pregnant?
You know, it's not. You know, I'm not making it up. I read something.
You know what you should do? You should call the Japanese government and tell them about these serious allegations that you're claiming against pregnant women.
Okay, fine. Whatever, fine. What are you gonna do?
Way to go. It's okay, just give it to me.
You kidding me?
Okay,
Wait.
seriously.
Yeah. Okay. I really want the best piece. You want to try this? How good is that?
Hey everyone, I wanted to give a special shout out to our collaborator, Two Nerds Candle Company. Not only do they have great products, but they are also giving back to a great cause. You can tell that they take a lot of pride in making their candles. My favorite is Spock's Monday Coffee. They are also donating 10% annually to support Women in STEM, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. You can use our code DSP or go to our link tree to get 20% off your entire order. We think that this company is great, and we think you will too. So go check them out. Everybody, we back again.
Hey, we're back and we're live. No jokes here in this moment because, it's a serious topic. So we're back.
Okay, there you go. First time to see that happen. Talking about a lot of racy things here.
Yeah,
You
well,
never
this
did
is,
that.
I feel like, we're back and we're live, and the way I usually go, we're making, I'm glad everyone's doing okay.
Okay, there we go. All right, Pauline, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Could you give us a little bit of your background and just how did you get into the mental health field?
Yeah.
Let me make it short. So I was born in Iran, and the country had just been through a ton. So huge revolution a few years back, and they were in the middle of a big war with Iraq, and things were just getting really difficult. My parents didn't want to leave, but felt pulled to leave, partly for safety, partly for kind of other reasons. My dad always says, I felt God telling me this is what should happen. And he's a pastor, and so that worked for him. So they moved to Los Angeles, where my mom's side of the family was. And so I grew up in Los Angeles, and I'm Iranian Armenian. So, born in Iran, my parents worked with Iranian refugees and, those that had converted from different backgrounds and religions to Christianity. So they had a church, and the church sponsored refugees. And so I have the Iranian piece, but ethnically I'm Armenian. And so there were the Armenian communities, the Iranian communities. And of course, I got introduced to just mainstream white culture, having grown up in Los Angeles. And so I feel like I was always straddling these different worlds, and being someone that's really perceptive and kind of quick, especially in the social realm. I realized how quickly different words were used or different norms were applicable in one setting versus the other. But, you always think your childhood is normal until you get introduced to difference. And then you're like, oh, everyone didn't do that. Everyone doesn't like this. Everyone doesn't experience this. And so I really struggled, I'd say late high school and early college. Biggest struggles were just understanding my emotions and really kind of running into issues in relationships. Huge struggles with my parents. And so that was around the time that I was like, I don't really want to go to church. This doesn't feel like the right thing for me. Try telling that to a pastor. I'm a PK, if you know what that means. That was not something that was, it just wasn't done. And so it caused a lot of conflict with my parents. And there was just so many different things that came out during that time that were really kind of the first times that I was thinking about my identity, my background, what I wanted from life, all those identity struggles of the 20s. And then at 24, my mom died. So my mom passed away at 24, and that kind of threw me, obviously, for another loop. I saw my dad struggle with his mental health. I struggled with my mental health. And a friend of mine, white friend, was like, you should go to therapy. And I was like, that's weird. I don't know. Like, that's a weird thing. Why would I go talk to a stranger? It's weird. It's like, yeah, it's weird. Yeah. I was like, wait a second. What's that going to help? Like all this stuff that I kind of heard. Like, why would you go talk about your family stuff outside of the family? I don't want to tell them about my dad. And then I started having big struggles with my dad and our relationship. But I tried it. And I always say it gave me this like twofold experience of I felt like it was a really intimate space, but I also felt like my therapist, who was a white dude, and I love him. Shout out to Richard, wherever you are. He was doing his postdoc. I saw him at the UCLA Counseling Center. Thank you, Richard. But I just felt like some things didn't fit. There was a lot of like, your dad's just, you're, a separate human, and whatever happens to him, that doesn't pertain to you. And I'm like, yeah, I guess at some level I understand that. But on another level, my mom's dead. I come from a collectivistic background. You're not just like, bye, dad. Like, I can't just go live my life as if that doesn't affect me at all. And so I just kind of felt like I'd leave the therapy sessions feeling like something doesn't fit, something's missing, but also like therapy is a lot better than I thought it was. And shit does change when you talk to someone. So I was having all those experiences. I was off to getting on track to getting a PhD in sociology. And I actually made a huge shift went into psych. I'd taken 0 psych classes. I'd never even taken a Psych 101 class until my master's program. So I was getting calls from a few universities that will remain unnamed that were scouting me for their PhD programs. And I was kind of like ghosting them, just not picking up their phone. I interviewed at USC. A month and a half later, I was sitting in a marriage and family therapy master's program. So people were like, what path did you take? Can I do it? I'm like, no, you can't. Because my path was just this like, throw it at the wall, make quick decisions, trust your gut, and pivot when necessary. So all that to say, here I am in a master's program, learning about psych, learning about mental health, feeling like, wow, I could really take this back to my community. But again, having this feeling of that doesn't fit. And wait, that not for families. And what about families of color? What about if you're poor? Did that still fit? And I felt like I was the annoying kid in a lot of my classes where they were like,
You were.
no, answer that at the end, or we've got multicultural week, and you're like, no, but I have all these questions and it doesn't seem to fit with the curriculum. It was like, learn this theory and then we'll attach culture. And I'm like, but I feel like the theory itself doesn't fit with the culture. And so I did have those disconnects, went on to get a PhD in counseling psychology, which does have some social justice roots, but again, had some of those similar experiences and found that my fellow, mostly people of color that were having some of those struggles, we kind of led each other through the grad school process. And so it wasn't until I was sitting in front of, thousands of daughters of immigrants with all of my training. I probably had like 10,000 hours of training for my master's program and my PhD program, like years and years of hours and hours and hours, plus a 2,000-hour internship, a 2,000-hour postdoc. And I'd say 85% of that was daughters of immigrants, first gen, second gen, immigrants themselves. And I got to hear so many people like saying all of the same things that I felt, asking some of the same identity questions, struggling in the same way with their mental health. And it just felt like, wow, this is the confirmation I need. There is a whole group of people that is just feeling, especially at predominantly white universities where I'd see so many women of color in therapy, like, oh my gosh, this is a cultural thing. This is a socio-political thing. And that just got me onto figuring out the intersections between culture and mental health. So now I really specialize in working with the children of immigrants, the daughters of immigrants, creating that sense of community, creating myself as a resource, talking about the experiences I had so that other women don't feel it's like a them problem. This is a collective thing a lot of people are trying to figure out. And I also work with intercultural couples because relationships were always, especially romantic relationships, were areas where those cultural clashes would often happen. And then the reason I picked the scene we're going to talk about later is because of the struggles I had with my immigrant parents and those immigrant kind of family clashes that happen when your parents have a different set of cultural values. So long story of really kind of not even understanding myself as a multicultural being to then hearing thousands of people kind of have some of the same inner thoughts I'd had and realizing, okay, this is a thing. And it's now the only thing I do.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
I got a question. Oh, damn, I lost it. There it is. So you are the spokesperson for all immigrants in America.
Oh my gosh. No.
You speak for all immigrants. So we need to have you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's good to know. You're the immigrant number one.
Yeah, I definitely feel that I've got the privilege of having heard all of those stories, but the more that I learn, the more I'm realizing we are just so incredibly diverse that there's like every time we talk about it, there's so many more diverse pieces and nuances, and that's what keeps my work interesting.
I'm just saying, when they start looking for all the immigrants, I'm gonna point them towards you because you know them all, so they're gonna get them. I'm making a political joke right now because there's so much hate for immigrants in America, in the whole world right now. Everyone hates all immigrants, even though all these nations are based off of immigrants.
Yeah. Also, a little tip and trick for anybody listening to this show. Anytime Nas starts stuttering or has that voice, it's always bullshit.
Yeah.
It's always bullshit.
When I sound like a shrimp boat captain.
Oh, no. I love shrimp. Who are you? From Michigan. Where's shrimp in Michigan?
I'm Creole.
Yeah. Creole on my Mexican side. What?
I'm on Mexican. That nice shrimp. And then as this, that was magnificent, Doc. Thank you for that introduction. Who you are. That was quite lovely. And I know there's a lot of stuff that comes with that, right? There was a lot of stuff that comes with. Thank you for the vulnerability. I wanted to make a joke, and then we're going to pivot back to Spencer doing real, actual interview skills. So, how does it feel knowing that you're a Satanist because you don't believe in religion?
Oh my God! What is that? What is that?
Don't answer that. That's a complete joke.
On lists after this podcast, no immigrant list, Satanist list.
You're an immigrant Satan, apparently, according to somebody.
Immigrant Satanist is like the worst of all.
I know. And
it was my career. It was good to be, to be riding it for a while until
Well, that was, I was going to pivot this. So your career sounds fantastic until today.
Yes.
Unfortunately, after the show, it's going to completely plummet.
Correct.
Hey, it was fun while it lasted.
They're going to be looking for you after this. The reason why I make that joke is a very serious point is for a lot of these immigrant families, religion is a very important thing, whether you're a pastor's kid or not, even more so being a pastor's kid. Jesus. I work with a lot of those kids. But it's tied into a lot of the cultures. And to have that, separation or discernment out or away, just discerning in general, can be seen as a sin. And so I just want to put some respect on that while having some fun with it, right? Because that's what makes people actually listen to things. And, the autism kicks in. I just like to have fun. So we'll get into that in a second and how that experience shapes and stuff. I'm going to kick it back to Spence for actual interviewing in a good way.
Yeah, no shrimp boat camped in here. So on your website, you talk about psychodynamic therapy. Can you explain what is that?
Yeah, so psychodynamic therapy, I will give its credit to kind of Freudian and Jungian roots. So caveat that there are some racist and misogynistic undertones from that. And so it needs to be adapted in order to be used. But the way I use it is that you look at some of the dynamics from childhood that might be repeating and patterns that might be repeating. And you look at that as one root of, things have to repeat in order to repair. And psychodynamic means we look at the psychological roots, the dynamics at play, and how those might be impacting your life. How you do that in a culturally informed way is that you recognize that it didn't all start in childhood, and there's a context that's happening. So Western psychology puts the entire onus of responsibility on the parents, as if they created this, as if you don't come from a people, you don't come from a lineage, and that none of those things actually repeat. And so really, you can't look at childhood as the end of it and the source of everything. You got to go beyond that. So that's why I say weaving together modalities like psychodynamic, where I ask my clients about their childhoods. I want to know about that, but it's not the end all be all. I also want to know about, your mom was pregnant when there was a war and your family was separated. Oh, there was this going on. Oh, you're currently still experiencing this other thing, or, you live in this body and you're constantly unsafe in that because of the state you live in. Those are all going to matter. And it's not just your childhood that makes things difficult for you. So that's how I kind of weave it in, but we do use psychodynamic, and that's just a fancy way of saying your childhood stuff matters.
Yep. My peanut gallery daddy issues, boy. I got, we all got the daddy issues. I got mom issues. I got auntie issues. I got all the issues.
Cousins, third cousins. I don't even know them.
Yeah.
That's the issue. You don't even know them.
Hey, man, they just take turns beating my ass. So. Sorry. Mexican family.
Anyways, not about your traumas. I asked this for our last guest, but I would love to ask you this. Like for you, your culture in general, like what is your goal as a psychologist, as somebody who represents your culture, but represent yourself as well? What is your goal to kind of speak with people who are from your culture that may think like therapy and mental health are something that are on like a back burner for, you know, life in general? Like, what is your goal with that? Do you want it to make sure like it's on the forefront of what they're thinking about, and like how it's going to affect like their kids themselves in the future? Or are you kind of just like, you know what, it's hard to change a culture by yourself, but like, you know, like what are your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah. I definitely think that it's no one person's responsibility, nor is it going to be one person's success that's going to change anything, whether it's a social justice issue, whether it's a culture, whether it's breaking a stigma. But I'm all about my responsibility versus the result. So
Mhm.
my mission is to promote education, healing, and empowerment. And so, you know, maybe I'm talking myself out of a job, but I'm actually a therapist that doesn't believe that therapy is the end all and be all of healing. If you're never going to get to therapy, listen to a podcast like this, watch shows, read books, you know, do other sorts of things. But I think I want to spread awareness that we have an emotional kind of realm, a mental health realm. We are holistically, that is part of our well-being, and you can't deny that and not have any costs to your life, to your relationships, to your well-being. And so absolutely I'm here to educate and promote, but I don't see myself as a sole person trying to change this. I think each of us, the more that we share our own stories and the more that we use our own strengths and gifts toward talking about these things in a more public way that reduces shame, increases education, gets people to think about it. Absolutely. I think the impact of that over time is a cultural shift.
Mhm.
So that, you know, I promote and work with the children of immigrants because oftentimes those are the people that are coming in to seek some type of care. Through them, I've seen so many next layers, older generations also get impacted. Conversations that they're starting with their elders, different ways of acting or parenting that their parents are seeing. And that's kind of a shift as well, even though I'm just working with one group. And so I don't have to hit at every single person. We're so embedded in different relationships that if you get one member of the family that has an awareness that mental health is important and takes care of themselves, there's going to be some impact in that entire system. That's just the way it works.
Question. You can pivot if you want to on this. For me, I know it, and people are going to see this as racism. This is not racism. When you work with people that are your population, your people, they look like you, they talk like you, they have the same right lineage as you, right? It means more to me. It does. I love all my kids. Trust me. Some of them I hate. Majority of them I deeply love and very protective of. But then you get the ones that look like you and your family, and those are the ones I'm like, you know, let's do it. I'm going to get you to win no matter what when it comes to your wellness, boundaries, eating right, you know, sticking up for yourself with your professors, advisors, family, whatever it is. And those sessions are tough because when they lose, I lose. When they win, I win. And they know that too, because they'll be like, Nas, it's different with you than some of the others. And I say, I know it's different because I'm invested in this shit. I don't know if I'm supposed to be, but I am. So with you as a therapist, because rarely do I get to talk to other therapists of color, rarely, especially someone like you. By you, I'm meaning like, not only are you here in the States, but also you come right from a different country. And so you're deeply invested in many different things, many different cultures and ethnicities. So I wonder when you're working with these populations, because you specialize in this and you've got thousands and thousands, you're an expert in this now with immigrant families. Do you feel like it means more working with them than some of the other folks? I don't want to get you in a gotcha moment. This is just me just being authentic to myself. When I'm working with a young Latino boy, right? When I'm working with another Arab kid, I'm like, it is magnificent and heartbreaking at the same time. Do you feel like that with some of your clients? Maybe even like this video that you chose today. It's a mom. She's going through it, right? And it was hard for me to fully connect to it because we've seen some really sad stuff. It was because of the subtitles. And with the dyslexia, I can't really connect my emotions when I'm reading. And so I realized, I'm like, why? I'm always crying. I'm always crying. Spencer knows I'm always crying, but I couldn't do it for here. And I felt it, but then I had to go back to reading. So I was like, what the hell's wrong with me? I'm telling you this on the fly. Do you feel connected to folks like I do? Or no, you feel connected to all folks? Or is it just your folks you feel even more connected to? I know that was long-winded. I wanted to give context to it. That way no one calls me a freaking bigot.
Yeah, no, I see what you're talking about. I think I have a heart for all daughters of immigrants because there are so many universalities. Yeah, you too, great. But like, daughters of
No,
immigrants,
I'm pointing at you. They represent you.
yeah, it represents me, right? And the women that I grew up with a lot of like two big communities that influenced my upbringing were the kind of Latino community. I grew up in Los Angeles, so lots of Mexican culture, my first boy, all of that. And then you've got Asian communities where, going to magnet schools with mostly other immigrant kids, Vietnamese, Korean, Chinese. Those were the three kind of big Asian groups that I connected with. And so these were my best friends growing up. And so I feel like daughters of immigrants make me think of the women that I grew up with.
Yeah.
And yet I do hear what you're saying. It's something really, really special when you have a child around my age that left Iran at the same time, has some of those same stories. It's going to hit differently on a personal level. So I think the second one is like my heart for all daughters of immigrants. It's really meaningful work, even if you've got a woman coming from Kenya with a very different story, because I think some of the frameworks that I can provide them, even if the stories are different, they connect to some of the same themes. And so that feels deeply meaningful. And there's something cool that happens where when they don't look like me, I'm like, but we're really vibing on this level and speaking some of the same language, even though we don't speak the same language. But then there's like another kind of vibe that happens when it is somebody that literally is speaking my same language and has some of the same experiences as well, right? And so I think another piece to it is that I grew up very light and white passing. And so that's a very different experience than, with a name like Pauline, where my parents, put Patrick, Pauline, and Melody. We don't have Middle Eastern sounding names. And my parents were heavily influenced by the West. My mom had a master's in English literature, and my uncle studied in France. And so there was a lot of Western influence, even though they were in Iran, and even the names that they chose, French names and other names that didn't have to do with their own culture, which tells you something about how far Western imperialism, colonialism, and all of globalization kind of impacts media, culture, and all of that. But all that to say is that I rarely find like a white passing woman with some of these particulars, but when I do, it means something. Like there's like another layer of validation for that younger self that maybe didn't feel enough, even in her BIPOC communities, didn't feel enough. So I hear you. There's something that it's like each of those layers where you can find resonance. I feel like there's more investment. And that's where you kind of have a little bit of a different approach than general therapy, where you have to stay as objective as possible. There's no way to be objective. And I'm telling you, the more pieces that connect, ethnicity being one of them, nationality being one, maybe religion, another pastor's kid, the more of those pieces connect to my own story, absolutely the vibe is going to feel different, and they feel it. And I let them know. Now, I get this sometimes even when I have daughters of immigrants who have lost their moms. That too is
That's
like
a tough
another
one.
layer of, whoa, like I'm invested in you, knowing there's life after grief, or you can still connect with her. Like I get invested in those daughters of immigrants because of the loss piece, but of course the ethnic piece, the PK piece, the particularly for my culture, all of that, just each of those pieces means something and is meaningful, even though I love working with all daughters of immigrants, even without those points. But yeah, it hits different when there's those points of connection.
Points of connection, and some of them tally. With me, it's always neurodivergent folks, right? Autistic folks. And so when I'm working with my own people, then you put a thing of color on top, and then you put some socioeconomic stuff on it, right? Or they got a mannerism or certain thing like the family does, right? And I'm like, oh, well, kid, we gonna make you stuck with me, kid. You ain't escaping me. We gonna make it to graduation. And then when you don't think they're gonna make it to graduation, I start to get scared. Where normally I don't get scared, and normally I don't feel like a failure. But when stuff starts going sideways, I'm like, fuck. Not this one. This one has to make. And I know this is where we talk about transference and counter-transference, but like, I mean, that's the thing that happens when you really care about folks and they do represent your identities, because we don't see our people in these positions. So we want our people to get there. So we have something in this, right? We want to be the people that we needed when we were younger. So I just wanted you to kind of speak on it, and you did magnificently. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it's the advocacy piece too, that it's like where advocacy and our work comes together. You have to when a group of people don't get the same resources and they're not starting off at the same place, because most of my training was in academic institutions, and where you see, wow, this kid and this kid did not come from the same resources, even though they're sitting in the same classroom. There's that advocacy piece where you want to jump in as not just a objective, distant therapist, but someone that's like, here's some resources, or let's try this out. And, Western psychology would say, okay, you're overstepping or you're over identifying. Whereas I'm thinking, no, you're actually relating to the real needs that this kid has. You can't just talk about their feelings. They do need resources. They do need encouragement. Like they need that kind of encouragement. Maybe they need that recommendation, or for you to bring in a book, or to bring in your story. Maybe you just showing up and saying, you're coming to this office and you're looking at me as having made it with a degree on the wall. I came from a similar place. Sometimes they need that. And that is actually providing equitable care, is not giving everyone the same, but giving people according to what they need to thrive and what they need to feel empowered. And so I think that's the advocacy piece that I always felt like I always pulled into my roles. And that's why even when I worked at the university, I was always like the liaison to the Middle Eastern Students Union, and always stepping outside of my role as just therapist to be in the community, share food, share stories, have them know you as a person, because you recognize how many barriers were there for you getting to where you are and how little you had in that support. And you want to make sure that you change it one kid at a time. So I see that as like a really big advocacy piece, rather than, oh, that's your stuff bleeding into the work.
Thank you. We have yet to talk about this on the podcast. I'm glad it's not me running my mouth. I'm glad someone's much smarter than me talking. Thank you.
Well, not at all, but I'm willing to say it,
Yeah, no, I said it for you, motherfucker. So.
Well, we're both saying it over here.
We're all agree.
Yeah.
Well, this is a core.
You're smarter than him. It's okay. It's okay. It's all right.
Shrimp boat captain over here. So
I know. Believe me, you don't have a shrimp boat captain. I hope you don't, Pauline. I really don't.
Okay. Spence, you got any more questions? I figured if you got any more, you can shoot one more probably.
Yeah. So you have some free resources on your link tree.
Okay.
But you have one specifically called it's a guide for communicating with your immigrant parents. Can you talk a little bit about that? I find that kind of interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the how it came to be story.
Real quick, pause. So you smiled when he asked you the question. Very quickly, why did you smile?
Because of the story I'm about to tell you.
Okay, because I could see the joy. You're like,
yeah,
you were like, Spence mentioned it, and you were just like,
well, thank you for this home run right here.
Okay, let's do it. Sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to acknowledge that other people, like when you see smile like that, that's a real smile. They'll say that certain folks or cultures, specifically white folks, they just smile with the teeth. That was your whole soul. Yeah. So get into your story.
Of course. So it's with my grandma. So imagine me, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, and I'm going to my grandparents' house, which was a regular occurrence. My grandma says to me, "You've gained weight." Okay. So she tells me, "You've gained weight." And I, burst into tears, run into the bathroom. I remember their bathroom, pink bathtub, and I'm crying in there. And my mom comes in to kind of, check in on me. And she's like, "What's going on?" I was like, she said I gained weight, and she said, "Okay. And, what's going on for you?" I'm like, "She's saying I'm fat. I'm going through I didn't probably say I'm going through puberty, but that's what was happening. My body was changing." And so, I'm just
I got
like,
a deep voice.
I was like, everything's different, she called me fat and all of this. And she says, "Look, grandma, like how big is grandma?" I'm like, "Big, she's bigger, and I was like, and she's like, "Is she a small woman?" I'm like, "No, my grandma was like 5'10", big woman, strong woman." The reason my grandpa, talks about seeing her move something and being like, "Oh, look at that, like a strong woman," So my grandma was a strong woman. We joke about my grandma's like strong hands. Like she would massage the sickness out of you when you were sick. She was like it was called, she'd be like, "Chambarem kiss." Chambarem means like meeting you, let me meet you. So my grandma was a strong woman. My mom said, "Look, grandma grew up on a farm.
Yep.
And sometimes they didn't have a lot to eat. And seeing people eat, what do we do every time we come to grandma's house? Well, we get food. Is she always giving you and us food to take home?" I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Grandma wants to feed you. She noticed you're gaining weight and that you've gained weight. That's an observation. She's not actually meaning it as an insult.
Okay.
And I know, she's like, I know if that came from our neighbors, which were white neighbors at the time that lived on our right, she's like, if that came from the neighbor's name, then I understand that would be a little different versus grandma, she wasn't saying you don't look good. She was saying, oh, maybe you've been eating more or what's been going on. Like she's noticing that as a marker of your well-being and something to talk about. It doesn't have all of the other pieces because grandma didn't grow up with people needing to be thin. She grew up with like farm people who eating and abundance was linked into weight. And so she doesn't have some of these things. And I remember I took a moment because if I'd ever gotten thin or if I'd been sick for a few days, my grandma would say, oh, your face, because I'd immediately lose weight in my face. She'd say, oh, your face is getting thin. Let's feed you. And she would feed me. And there was a moment where it was like, okay, I had my own experience of feeling like my grandma's like criticizing me, commenting on my body. No, in Western culture, you're not supposed to comment on someone's body. And then I had this other piece of like, oh, my grandma's coming from a different context.
Yep.
Weight doesn't mean the same to her. And that was a moment of translation in my own life. Fast forward years later, and I had this woman, Filipino woman, sitting, and she said, every time on my couch, saying, every time I go home at the end of my trip, my parents are like, why do you have to go? Every time you come, it's too short. And she's like, they're guilting me. And they're just like, it's never enough. And I sat there and I don't know what hit me, but I had this moment of translation, remembering that bathroom where my mom kind of did that. And I said, oh my gosh, Yolanda, that was not her name. Yolanda, what if they're trying to say, I miss you? And she was like, she burst into tears. And she was like, oh my gosh, like, I never thought about that. You're right. They're not saying it as real criticism of me not coming home. They're sad that I'm leaving. Just like my grandma was probably saying, I'm noticing something's changing. Are you well? Are you good? Are you not good? What does this weight mean? I'm checking in on you. And that began translation. And so I started doing that with people where I would validate the feelings that they experience because my hurt at my grandma having criticized my weight as I thought that happened for me. You can't erase that. That did happen for me. And my mom helped me see there might be another way. And that fit for me because my grandma was literally the most unconditionally loving person I've ever known in my entire life. Like my grandma is a strong resource for me now. She died a few years ago. And so I use that translation, and the translation guide is 3 different scenarios, like a guilting scenario, a comparison scenario, and unsolicited advice. And it's just saying, here are some other possible things, not considering that someone is coming from the exact same cultural framework. What if we looked at your parents' cultural framework, and just like if they spoke a different language, you might translate, some of those words might get caught in translation, or you might feel offended, but, oh, that's the word they use for this. Sorry, my little light fell over. That began the translation piece. And so the translation guide is just like a snippet of 3 different scenarios that people can use to potentially translate what their parents might be saying. And again, it's got to be taken in context because some people's families and grandmas absolutely are saying something negative about their weight, and that needs to be acknowledged too. But it's another tool that I feel like people aren't, using very often. And the whole point is if you translate it and then you have another tool for, okay, let me possibly refer in a different way or respond in a different way, sometimes then it makes the whole dynamic go a little bit differently. Like Yolanda's example, her parents are, why don't you say blah, blah, blah? You just might say, I'm going to miss you too. I can't wait till I see you all in 3 months. What a different impact that dynamic's going to have versus Yolanda saying, I'm not going to come home anymore. Every time I'm leaving, you all are just talking about how I never come. Don't you realize? And then a big fight happening in this moment where clearly Yolanda's going home as a grown woman because her family matters. She wants to be close to them. So sometimes just that little translation piece helps you to respond to the deeper possible meaning they're having, and it changes the dynamic for just a different way, in a more positive, more easeful kind of way.
Yep. Yeah. Magnificent. Real quick, Spence, I'm gonna do shout out to grandmas real quick. You got grandparents? You got any shout outs to grandparents you want to do, man? I don't know. I feel I'm about to do a shout out to my grandma, so I figured I'd ask you first.
All my grandparents are dead,
Hey.
so
Hey, were they lovely? Were they lovely and awesome? Treated you well, or no? Were
my
they shitty?
grandfather, yes. Both of my grandparents on my dad's side, always loved them.
Okay.
Even though I didn't get to see them that much, yes. I love my grandma on my mom's side for a long time, but then some stuff happened where she started getting like disrespectful to my mom, and so I'm always protective of my mom, and
Mhm.
so no matter who it is, I don't even care. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty much like cutting you off there. But yeah, my grandfather, I even look like him.
Okay.
And so it's like for him, I'm always just trying to make sure to keep his legacy going. Shout out to Bob Cernick.
There you go. Shout out to Bob. That's where you get your good looks from, man.
That's right. That's right.
A good looking man right there. I tell you.
Marine right there. Shout out
shit.
to
There you
Bob.
go.
Yeah. Hoorah.
Yeah, you just had me
Semper
in my emotions thinking of my grandma Guerra treated me like fucking awesome. Right? And she was like an old school, like gangster ass Mexican too, man. Hard worker, farm worker, immigrant, very poor, got a store, right? I mean, put up with her husband, and was a very tough mom. Very tough. I'm not going to get into it, but she was very tough. And everyone was like pretty scared of her, but she treated me like gold. My father got locked up. A lot of people treated me like straight up shit. And she was probably one of the few people that actually treated me good. Like legit. Fed me, treated me nice. There was no abuse going on where everyone else would probably take their turns. For her, no, she would be like protecting, knowing that my pops was getting ready to come out. And she was like, your pops is awesome. They had a magnificent relationship. The reason why I bring this up is someone tried to shit on their relationship. And I was like, no, grandma loved, she told me all the time she loved my dad. And then, he helped her out, and then they did a magnificent marriage and all that. So shout out to some of the really good trooper grandmas that are maybe misunderstood, but are deeply loving and protecting, even though it may come out a little aggressive at times. I just wanted to put some respect in Grandma Guerra's name. So thank you. I was trying not to cry during that.
Yeah, my grandma was the absolute best,
Yeah.
And I feel so lucky I got to have both my grandparents, my maternal grandparents,
Love it.
in my life on a weekly basis growing up. And even well into my adulthood, I talked on the phone to my grandma at least 2 times a week, if not more, in my entire adult life. So my grandma was and continues to be the greatest resource for me. Just thinking about her calms me and comforts me. She showed me unconditional love. And that's where the translation piece of like this woman, I knew her not as someone that would ever want to hurt me, that kind of helped it. And so sometimes people are like, well, I think my family definitely doesn't have good intentions and they've abused. That's a different scenario. But the translation guide has helped a lot of people who know that there's love there, just sometimes get caught in those kind of cultural clashes that happen.
Survival, man. Survival. All right. Magnificent. Well, let's pivot into the show.
Yes. So, would you mind giving us a little intro to what the Persian version is?
Yeah. So the
Awesome.
Persian version is a movie, and it follows the main character Layla in her, I think she's in her 20s or 30s, and she, brings you into her life. In the beginning of the movie, she has a one night stand, and she ends up getting pregnant. And so the kind of movie follows her being pregnant and kind of dating this person named Max, and she's got a ton of brothers, and one of them's getting married, and she's got real problems connecting with her mom. There's this disconnect between her and her mom. She's the only daughter, and she can't seem to find a way, to connect with her mom. In the show, you also see that she was previously married to a woman, and the mom had kind of completely cut her out at that time. That relationship had really gone sour. So that there's that kind of piece of old stuff between her and mom, and the resentment build up from this relationship that she feels like her mom ruined, and ways that Layla was kind of completely excluded, told to leave from a Thanksgiving dinner and kind of cut out of the family. And also you see how Layla's father got sick, and how really Layla's mom had to be the one, or he gets sick later, but Layla's mom had to be the one to kind of step up, become this real estate person, and kind of reinvent and re-educate herself and have a business here in America in order to keep her family afloat financially. So in the reason I chose this particular scene is there's this pivotal moment. Layla's got a great relationship with her grandma, her mom's mom, which is very common. I see a lot of daughters of immigrants who can't connect with their mom, but that next generation, they've got a grandpa or a grandma that they really do connect to, who sometimes becomes like a broker and mediator of that relationship between the mom and the daughter. And she's saying to her, look, if only you knew your mom's story a little bit, you'd also have a context for some of these issues between the two of you. And Layla is somewhat resistant, but then in this scene, it's this kind of critical piece that is missing from Layla's understanding of why her family came to America. And so it follows that she sees how her mom left Shiraz, which is kind of a bigger city, moved to this rural town with her husband, who was a doctor. The husband ends up having an affair. The other woman gets pregnant, and you see everything that kind of happens with the pain of betrayal, the pain of losing a child, the pain of then having to mother a child that was the other woman's child, and then coming to America in order to escape the disgrace and the gossip that might follow that family. And then you kind of see at the end how the mom says, you know, I wanted so badly to have a daughter, the daughter she lost, and I have her years later, but it's like I can't speak to her. Every time I try to speak to her, I don't quite have the words. And I wish that you two could hear it in Farsi, because there are some pieces of the subtitle that don't quite get at it. It's just much more like anything, like it's much more heartfelt when you're hearing the exact words and the ways that it's being put together in the language of origin. And she just says, you know, like when it came time to speak, I couldn't formulate the words. And so this relationship of silence, this relationship of maybe criticism, this relationship of distance, you start seeing it a little bit differently now that you know some of the mom's story. And so I picked this because I think that it's so relatable for a lot of children of immigrants who maybe you're never even going to know what their stories are. Interesting point. One last thing I'll say about the clip is the mom was friends with this other woman, because it's a very, very small town. And this woman was like kind of like a different kind of woman than one she'd ever seen. She asks her how old she is, and she says, oh my gosh, you're a single woman. You're older than my mom. So you know that the mom was a very, you know, her mom was very, very young when she had her. And here is this woman who said, I went back to school in my 30s. It's never too late to go back to school. And later the mom does go back to school, learn, and become this like real estate person. So she kind of influenced her by opening her eyes to a very different kind of woman that she could be. And she goes to her home to give her a gift that she brought from the main city, Shiraz. She says she brought her a gift. Roya's not home, the other woman. And she turns on her radio. The woman said, dancing is good for the baby. Come by and dance anytime, even if I'm not here. And the music that she's dancing to is Layla, which later becomes the name of the daughter that she has in America years later. So I thought that was an interesting clip too, is like Layla is both this exciting symbol of chance to be a mom again to a girl. The woman that was the other woman, some of the friendship pieces and some of the kind of motivational pieces she took into it, and even chose to name her after the dance and the song that she was dancing to in that woman's place. And so there's all these links throughout, but that's kind of the gist of the Persian version.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for going through that. That was actually really great context on everything. So
yeah, I don't even know where the hell to start and breaking down the scene and the visual representation and how this fits in with folks with hyperphantasia or don't have the words to speak, right? So that's why we have this podcast, is to, you don't always have to do it through words. And a lot of us aren't the best with words, especially if you're ADHD, whatever, depressed, you know, autistic. So this is something really good to relate to about 50 different fucking things. I think there's two very graphic parts. And one of them that was the most terrifying is she see that her man is cheating on her. And then she goes and looks like, I couldn't see because it's real dark, but she goes to the ledge of either it was the ledge of something or a ledge of a well.
I think it was a well.
A well. And, you know, she's getting ready to jump. Because now this is horrible. This is heartbreak. This is agony. She already got a kid and now this is happening. And, you know, a million different things I would assume a new mom is like freaking out about. And then she goes into this hyperphantasic moment where she visualizes her dancing and so then soon one day, baby, we're going to dance together real soon. And then she decides to get off. And then she said, I apologize. I will be stronger moving forward. And that's a very critical moment where a therapist would take that moment and be like, that's not necessarily rock bottom. That's like, you don't want to end your life. There was like a will and a resistance and a want and a hope. And so some people will say that she's a coward or that she's soft. But to get pushed to the edge and then to rebuild your entire life, to still have the baby and go through with it, right? I mean, it's a lot of fucking resilience. Very tough scene. I thought that was probably the most emotional scene for me because there was no words. And so I didn't have to read. And so you're just witnessing someone whose life has just been shattered. So a lot of clients that I work with are going through that in a million different ways because, life, they think it's over because of school, grades, breakups, the kids coming, now single parent, the death of the family members or the support system happens, right? Maybe they got to go back to the country, unwillingly because of certain things or paperwork, visas, whatever it is. And so it's terrifying. And so some people will think the only way out is to escape. They don't want to die, but a lot of people will want to escape reality. And so I think that's something interesting I want to talk on, and then I'm going to kick it to you. I'm almost done talking technically about it, is not everyone is like suicidal because they want to die. A lot of folks that are neurodivergent, autistic, will say that maybe I want to die, I want to kill myself. This thing is going horrible. It's usually they just don't want to be in that moment anymore. They don't want to feel those feelings anymore. Absent, right? The apathy, if they can get to that, they would be good. The question is, how do you get them there? How do you ground them in this world, in this reality? How do you get them away from whatever the fuck is causing all that stress? And it's contextual. It's not always about your childhood, which you were pointing out earlier, right? It's the shit that's going on right now. It's just too much. And for her in that moment, it was too much. And so I can see someone completely deregulating. And then she was able to ground herself because she had that hyperphantasic moment where she can go and then remember why she's here. And her child is innocent. So there's a bunch of different things. I don't know why she didn't do it. Glad she didn't, because it looks like her daughter didn't make it there, but she was able to raise a magnificent family. It looks like moving forward. And it looks like there's a ton of love. One quick thing. Do her and her ma repair the relationship at the end of the show or no?
Not really.
No.
I think there's this to be continued, this healing moment. And I almost chose this, but I wanted to give you this context, but it might be helpful to get to the end where the daughter, Layla, is pregnant with a girl. And at the end, she's birthing that girl and the baby is fine. She's born. And the mom, now the grandma, holds the baby girl. And they name her, I believe, I haven't seen the end of the movie in a little bit. I believe they name her Arazu. And so it's like this like full circle moment, and maybe they don't. I don't quote me on that piece, but something. The little baby girl is there, and you see almost like grandma soften as she's holding this baby girl that her baby girl birthed, and I just take that as hope for the possibility of their repair. Hope for now that baby girl opening up the softness in her heart, because look. When we shut ourselves off to the pain, we also shut ourselves off to the joy, to the good stuff. You just don't want to go there, right? If the depths are too scary, you're just not going to go to those depths, whether it's good or bad. And something about her becoming a grandparent, which I've seen so many times with the children of immigrants, that once their parent becomes a grandparent, that child who maybe then reminds them of the innocence of childhood, boom, it kind of shatters and opens up, like breaks and bursts their heart open. And I just take that as, her mom was there for the birth, and something about this new baby coming into the family is going to create new space, especially now that Layla has this awareness from her grandma of what mom has been through. I just feel like there's going to be some conversations to be had and some bridges to be made and some connections that could possibly be there over time as Layla and her mom potentially repair. So I thought it was like a hopeful piece, even though you don't really see that repair happen. I think there's like a to be continued ... in the end of it.
What do you think about a mom experiencing that, the death of her child, and then obviously being forced another one and then to breastfeed that other one? So I would assume this is a whole chaos of like different emotions and hormones. This is definitely full-blown PTSD, postpartum, 100%. And then you wonder why she might have issues with her daughter because it's too hard to touch those emotions. And every time you look at your daughter, you remember the one that you lost.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, I don't know how this is even a question. That just sounds like a whole lot of shit to go through, brother.
There's like so many different layers of it. Is like this man that she loved, and even in those little scenes in the beginning where she comes back from Shiraz and you see the journey. It's this long journey. They're in a very rural part. You
Yep.
can tell the accent changes, and you can tell they're kind of in a more rural town. The dialect is different. So those are those kind of nuances that if you know the language, add to it. So it's telling you they're like a long way away from home. She's married this man, left her family. She's clearly very young. Her mom is 36. This is young women getting married. She leaves because he's a doctor. And so she's making the sacrifice, giving up her kind of family, giving up her life there, going and marrying this man. And even you can see, okay, yeah, him having an affair, that's one piece of it, but also the kind of emotional neglect in the relationship. Like she's talking to him, telling him, oh, Shiraz is so different. He's just like, I gotta go. I've got a patient. Like he's kind of emotionally disconnected. So she's kind of in this, she's made a huge sacrifice for a man. He's stepping out on her and emotionally is not able to connect with her in the way that she needs because she doesn't have a full family. She doesn't have a full, community around her anymore. It's just him. And she's followed him for his dream to continue being a doctor. And then you've got the betrayal piece. She has a child, so she's a young mom. You see her co-sleeping with the baby. So this baby, and you see him crying in the scene. I mean, she's a mom of a young kid who has all these various needs in this place without her mom, without her friends, without her community, without the comfort of people. She found out about the affair through that woman she gets the eggs and the milk from, who was like, she's that bitch put the dirt on your name, but you're pure, you're beautiful. She was like, what? That got the wheels spinning. But you can tell she is totally out of her element, gave up so much for this man, is doing the hard work of mothering, all of a sudden feels naive, and this like woman from the neighborhood is telling her something about her business, sees her husband having this affair with a friend, this one woman that she felt like represented a friend that she could open up to, a very different woman than her that was kind of inspiring and introduced her to like music and was very interesting. So she probably felt like, oh, thank God I'm not alone. I've got this other woman in this place. And then this woman is the one that does that. And she's pregnant. And so you just think, all of that stress. And then immediately it shows that she goes into labor, after that moment of suicidality is like the labor. So it almost feels like the reason she didn't is she recognized, oh my gosh, like other people are depending on me. I have a son. She heard the crying of Shiraz, her oldest son, and the baby she's birthing. So it wasn't like I deserve to live. It was like, oh my gosh, I gotta be a mom to these kids. I gotta hold myself together. And then the promise, like, I'll be strong, as if she somehow failed them by being heartbroken. She's alone. She's displaced. She's alienated. She's been betrayed by this man, betrayed by the friend. She's pregnant, which is already really hard. She's mothering a young kid. And then she goes off and then has this huge grief. And you kind of, the movie kind of goes in and out. And you see the dissociation and kind of her head turning. And it's like she probably felt totally out of her body from the hormones, the shock. I remember right when I gave birth to my daughter, she came fast and furious. And it was so much so soon.
Family.
I was holding her
Family.
and I was shocked. And the midwife kept saying, look in my eyes. You just had a daughter. You're totally safe. Take some deep breaths. I was absolutely in shock. And it wasn't not a traumatic birth. It was just very fast. So I can't imagine like beyond that, like birth itself is already a lot going on. And then the husband comes in and he's got this new, she's like seeing him for the first time. He's speaking the name of this other woman. She was like, how are you talking? Don't ever talk about her, in front of me ever again. And then he's like bringing this other kid. And she said, this is my milk for. So she doesn't even have a second. She's immediately got a newborn who's now drinking the daughter's milk, needing everything. She's got this other kid that she's left that now she's got to go. And then they're moving to America, where again, she's displaced, alone with this man who cheated on her. It's like,
fuck me, this is depressing. Jesus. Next topic.
So much shit.
And then she's got kid after kid. She has like, I don't know, 5 other boys, plus Layla, which is the daughter. They run into financial problems. So now she's got to go back to school, you know, learn English, learn real estate, hustle and grind. You know, there's just so many pieces. I feel like this woman was just in survival mode because she never actually had a chance to
entire
stop
life. Yep.
and even look at what was going on. And then at the end, the husband is sick and she's kind of taking care of him
Again.
and needing to do all of that alongside her son getting married. But good thing, yes. But it just feels like you see how fast and sped up it is. But I really wanted to break down like all of those various pieces that are just hitting her left and right. And silence became kind of the only way to just like not acknowledge, not go down into the depths of her heart and just focus on what needs to be done and for whom. Got to feed the kids, got to be financially stable, got to keep moving. Like that's just been that mom's life. Whereas daughter now, because of some of that stability, she's thinking about love. She's thinking about pleasure. She's thinking about fulfillment, like all of these things that mom never got to feel. And of course, mom feels judgmental. You know, mom is judging her and criticizing her, but it's often because the parent hasn't been able to reconcile those things within themselves. They've got that built up trauma that their kid is triggering in them. And instead of using it as a chance to look inward and get that support, they actually judge and other and fight with the child from a place of, you're making me feel things I don't want to feel. You're making me look and, you know, look at places I don't want to feel, that I think even the son that was not hers, Vahid, didn't do to her, like young Layla, who brings up her as a young daughter and her daughter who she lost. So at both of those layers, I could see why Layla was that much harder for her, because she's triggering her mom's trauma and she's triggering the things that her mom has pushed aside so she can keep going, so she can be strong, which means not have feelings, just do what is needed of her, whether it's mothering or whether it's being the breadwinner, like just keep doing, not feeling.
This is my opinion on this. I don't think that she's humanly possible. And I do my little head spin, the shrimp boat thing right there, but I'm being for real. I don't know if I would advise her if it was her therapist to like sit in your feelings, because those feelings will probably make you kill yourself. I'm gonna just be flat out for real for it, because that's too much shit. You listed out way too much shit. So you sitting in feelings, I don't know if you making it out. And so I think the only prescription there is to, how do we help you make things a little lighter? Because I don't even know if we want to touch emotions, because there's no way you're going to be able to regulate. If you go surfing into those deep ends, you're going to drown. I'd be terrified. As a therapist, I need to make sure that you had the tools first before we did any trauma work and any emotional work. It's too much. Yeah, if you started going down that rabbit hole, I'm like, God damn, when's it going to end? And then, you know, you just kept saying more and more and more. So it never ends. And so then you realize it's just all been damage. She did what she could do, which was shut up and move forward. So I'm not going to hate on the mom, but I'm sure her kids will hate on the mom. But you got to like understand as the kids too, like she's not here if she's, you know, processing things and sitting in things, and maybe she could have set more boundaries and this and that. I mean, I don't know. All I know is, goddamn, there's no way. I feel like the fact that she even made it out. So hopefully she gets to have some comfort and pleasure and joy with the little kid. And if the dad passes, right, then maybe that's another thing off of her back. So I'm going to pivot this. That's just a statement, thinking out loud, just validating, like, holy fuck. If you were to have a client that has 1/3 of the shit that this mom had going on, how do you work and support them? Or we can pivot into a different question. Have you worked with folks that have lost children, that have had stillbirths and things like that? Have you worked with folks like that? And or how would you work with this parent with a few of the things that she's been through?
Yeah. Well, you know, interestingly enough, I usually work with the Laylas.
The
Not
Laylas.
with the
Okay.
mom. are not coming in. The moms are the silent, I'm not touching that stuff. And she learned actually on that ledge, she learned that when you go down into those depths of whether it's love, connection, feeling, it's dangerous. I got to stay above that in order to be able to keep going.
Yeah.
But when you are cut off like that, you're not going to be able to attune to your kid
You're not.
the way that that kid needs. And so I see the Laylas who have grown up with the mom who is critical, the mom who is silent, the mom who put food on the table and clothes on their back, but wasn't emotionally there.
Yep.
They came home from a rough day of someone pulling their hair, and the joke that I get, it's like, oh, you came from Iran. Well, what did I do when I saw a big fat hairy cat? I ran, and then they would laugh, And so it's like, which is so stupid now. And I'm like, okay, haha, no, it doesn't. Like that would not get to me. I'm like, come up with better jokes, kids. But that kind of kid would run home and say to this mom, like, they made fun of me at school, which that kid is understandably hurt,
Yeah.
had a tough experience, feeling othered. And the mom's like, girl, I traveled on donkey and then bus and whatever to go have a stillbirth. Like, what are you talking about? So what does the mom say to that kid? That doesn't matter. Why are you complaining?
Suck
Just
it
focus
up.
on your studies. Suck it up, And that moment is such a miss because the mom is using the skills and life experience that she's had and the ways that she's coped. She's trying to give it to her daughter, but in it, she's totally missing how to attune to the daughter, how to be there for the daughter, how to be the soft place for her daughter so her daughter doesn't have to have the hard stuff she had. And in that miss, that daughter, the Laylas I work with, they grew up with a parent who, again, physically and financially cared for them, but was emotionally unavailable, critical. There was just that miss constantly. And you grow up just feeling like you're not cared for in the way that you're meant to be cared for. You're loved, but not loved in the way you need to thrive. And so you've got all these questions, you've got all these conflicts that come up, you've got the Thanksgiving when you're bringing your wife and then getting kicked out. Like you're having those moments, especially as you add other layers to it, which there's maybe the religious piece, the sexual orientation piece, the neurodivergent piece, whatever. You don't get your parent to understand you as a unique individual as you are. And then you've got all this pain. And I always want to start with that person and the pain they experience. You have to start with Layla and the criticism and the aloof mom who she respected but never felt emotionally connected to. And then and only then, when they are willing, when they are curious, you think, what might have happened? What are the things we know or even can maybe do some research on? When did your parents come to this country? What was going on? Is there a grandparent who might be able to fill in? Sometimes just knowing a little bit about your parents' history begins to then frame a whole different way. Now, it does not erase that they hurt you. If somebody runs your foot over with the car, you got to heal your foot because they ran that over. Full stop, you got to heal your foot. But would you want to know whether they were going out of the driveway and they were, inebriated, or whether they were really rushing out to help your grandma who'd fallen and they were out of their wits and crying and didn't see you? Like, that might make a difference for me, right? Was this like a drunken driving situation, or was this, oh my gosh, you were emotionally distraught and you were trying to help somebody and you didn't have your wits about you? My foot broke. But the context is different. And that's where I have an issue with people saying intent doesn't matter, only impact. I'm like, in relationships, intent does kind of matter. I'd like to know somebody that I love, why do they do what they do? Why is our relationship this way? Because sometimes when you can make sense of it, again, you're never going to bypass the pain. And sometimes children of immigrants are like, well, let me understand my parent because then it won't hurt. I'm like, your 4-year-old self got hurt because your parent wasn't there. And that's nothing about our cognitive understanding of why is going to change the experience you had, and you're going to have to fill that 4-year-old's cup. We're going to have to do that. There's no way around that. But the cognitive piece helps to situate what happened to them and what happened to create that. And I've noticed that really helps to loosen the shame and really kind of help that person to realize that this was not something that had to do with them. This was their parents coping that led them to have to be distant in that way that then showed up in this way. And I think that helps begin the healing when you see your parent as traumatized. And of course, so many nuances of like, just because they've been through stuff doesn't make it okay for them to continue to hurt you. You have to also protect yourself, set those back. To why I work with adults. I don't work with children because children are dependent and vulnerable. Adults can make choices. Usually, I mean, if you're still financially relying on your parents, that might be a little bit of a tricky situation, but it really helps to situate the lineage piece in order to find your healing through the situation. So I usually work with the Laylas, not with the moms, because the moms, they're not coming in to talk about it. It might be too much. But the Layla, knowing that, that's the 2-minute conversation she's having if she's breastfeeding her daughter and seeing her mom open up and somehow lighten because she's able to say, you know, one time, and this happened to me with a friend's mom. One time, as I was sitting and breastfeeding my daughter, she said to me, you know, I thought to myself one time to throw myself off a balcony because it was so hard for me as a mom. And she said, but my daughter cried and I knew I needed to go breastfeed her. And just seeing
Real
me
shit.
there, and she just dropped that on me. And I said, that must have been so hard for you to do alone. And she said, it was. That moment was healing for that woman, even though she's never going to go in to therapy. And that's how, as children of immigrants, when we understand those layers of our lineage and have pieces of the story, sometimes we don't, but sometimes we get little bits and pieces of the story. I think it helps us to then reorient and reposition, and it changes how we interact with our parents, even if the end goal has to be the same, setting boundaries and doing what you're going to do. And sometimes I've seen the parents find healing in the children's healing because the parents never going to come in and do that healing on their own. And I'll say this last thing of, I've seen that happen with my dad, me having kids. My dad has shared more bits from his childhood. He's shared more bits of him being a dad. Like he always says to my husband, wow, I see you changing diapers and feeding your kids and doing all this. I didn't know what time my kids went to sleep. I never changed a diaper. I was not a dad like you are. And I could see my dad processing, as well as almost like having a pride that things have changed, that his daughter is having a different experience and the kids are having a different experience of being a dad, you know, of their dad, that he was a dad to us. And so those little moments are those moments where I see my healing and how I'm treating my children. My dad, I can see his wheels are spinning. He's sharing and he's also absorbing and healing from some of those things as well, even though we're not, you know, having us go to therapy, or he's not going to therapy to deal with the traumas of his past, for example.
Yeah. Therapy's all fake anyways. So I'm sorry.
Fake jobs.
Fake jobs.
They're all that. You're just like, yeah, therapy's fake.
Fake news. Those are, I'm going to stop. Immigrants taking our jobs. The immigrants are taking our jobs.
I love how you stopped and then you went back.
They're just taking our jobs.
I had to say it. I had one comment and then I'm going to kick a dispense and then I can also ask a question. So the one comment is I didn't really learn about my mom. Obviously I tell all my clients, you're going to hold your parents accountable. And your mama can't love you or do this and that. And then they're never going to be able to do it. And there's reasons why it ain't got nothing to do with you. You don't suck. They don't hate you. She just can't do it. They can't. And that's fine. And so my kids would be like, why don't they love me? And I'm like, kid, you're easy to love. I don't know. It ain't about love. It's just, they just don't have it in them because of stuff. And so those are gut-wrenching moments. And it affects relationships moving forward with that kid, with friends, loved ones, men, women, whatever. It fucks up a lot of things. Intimacy messes up a lot of intimacy things. Getting a lot of poor, abusive relationships, neglectful relationships. But I didn't learn about my mom until one of my aunties talked to me afterwards, after the funeral. And she's telling me, and she's sitting me down and thinks she was a little inebriated. And so I was like, and then she kept going. She's like, let's go sit over here. And I'm like, whoa. So that explains probably about all of it. This explains why people disliked me so much, because of what my mom had to go through, or how she was the chosen one out of all the girls in the immigrant family to get educated, and all these other things, and how the other girls were abused horrifically. I'm not going to explain how. And she wasn't. It's like, oh, this is why there's hostility towards me and my family. And this is why Ma is so traumatized. And she would say it, you son of a bitch, you're lazy. And I had to work in the fields. She would make sure I knew that. In the field, you ain't got to do nothing. You're just playing your video games. I'm like, I'm What do you want me to do? I'm 12, I'm 10. And so she would work me. I worked hard. I worked hard. And I went with my dad afterwards after I ran away, and I worked hard, very hard. And I remember being in graduate school, just hating privileged and people with money. Hating. I'm using the correct word, hate. And one of my boys, a military dude, a Republican white man, military dude, but he was my boy because he was a good guy. And it goes, hey, man, so you hate privileged folks, huh? I said, yeah, fuck them. And I said, you ain't privileged? He said, no, I ain't privileged, but you trying to make money, right? I said, yep. And he said, you going to give your kids everything that you didn't get, right? I said, yep. And he says, so your kid's going to be privileged as shit, right? And I said, wait a minute. Well, I don't like what you just did. Wait a minute. And then I stopped being so angry and hateful towards people with privileges or money or comfort, suburban, white. The hatred dissipated because how could I identify as that privileging my kids and then hate myself? Everything impacts everything. Love the clip. Love everything that you're saying. I wish more of us knew about some of our parents before they would pass, because that would give us context. And it wouldn't have healed our relationship with my mother, but I would have known how to treat her and like maneuver conversations around her and maneuver things around other family members, right? I had the whole picture now. Well, mom can never talk about this picture. And so having that whole picture, my God, that wouldn't have been just an asshole to her, even though the bad things she did, I just wouldn't have been reflecting so much of it back. Still holding her accountable for the actions that she did. But it would have changed the dynamic. And right, I know my father's stuff, but because he's an emotionally deep individual and he goes on his hyper-phantasic moments where he has to tell you what happened in the visuals and the deaths and the murders and in prison and losing people. And right, I mean, it's intense, right? To see family members die, it's intense. And so he tells me how fucked up he is. So that's why the connection is always there. That's why I don't get angry and hostile, because I understand the human that I'm dealing with and all the background. Still have to hold him accountable. When the old days, when he gets super mad, he doesn't get super mad now because he can barely walk. So if he gets mad now, he falls over. So it's not a good thing. Don't be mad that I said that, Dad. So I'm Spence, do you have any questions for her? Because I want to give you some space to ask.
Of course. I guess it's just like, so you talk about it a little bit on your website too, how you're in a multicultural relationship yourself and things like that. I mean, how is that, has that relationship ever affected your relationships like with family members and things like that? Because some people can get very, hostile at certain relationships, depending on like race, culture, things like that. So just kind of want to know.
No, it's interesting because I think had I chose, like, this is the stark example I always think of. So one of my first very serious boyfriends, kind of at the end of college, around the time my mom was getting sick again and all of that, in my early 20s, was with an Iranian man whose religious background, his family was Baha'i, and Baha'is are kind of a minority religion in Iran and kind of believe in the oneness of all religions. And that was like a major no-no with my family.
Oh.
They were just like, we can't ever, they literally took me out. I remember we went to a Wood Ranch barbecue spot. I don't even know if they exist anymore, but we went, we're sitting, we're eating barbecue.
They try to get your ass a barbecue, boy. Yeah, that sounds like some shit my dad would do. Let me get this motherfucker some good food, and I'm going to tell him that he can't do this.
I'm like talking about random things, and they're like, this is not a fun dinner. And I'm like, and okay, let me put my
damn it.
Yeah.
Son of a bitch.
I just wanted my cornbread. Damn.
Can't eat this shit.
And he told me, like, we can't see you with this person. We can't endorse this. If you move down and move forward here and you think you're going to marry this person, we can't come to the wedding. We can't give you away to this person. Like, and they told me, you better find, like, what we would be okay with is a nominal Christian, meaning only a Christian by name. He doesn't have to actually be like somebody that goes to church, because I recognize at that point, like, I'm not going to be a born again Christian. And they're like, a white guy, choose like a nominal Christian and a white guy. Like, that is somebody that they're basically saying, we're not going to allow you to have that full choice, but we'll give you a little, we'll compromise. I know. And they straight said, they're like, this would be the ideal scenario. Right. So, I'm remarried, so I was divorced. My first husband was exactly that, like German and Greek.
Jesus,
and
you went
phenomenal
real white,
race,
girl. You went to ultimate white.
You
right?
said, hey,
Like,
master race.
She understood the assignment.
yeah, I got it. It was like 6 foot tall, 6'5", so it was tall,
shit.
white guy.
Damn.
Nominal Christian. Went to church on Easter, went to church on Christmas. Like that was part of his upbringing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
My second husband, he's Italian American, and he's got a mom who was an immigrant. She came when she was 4 from Italy, and he still has Italian roots, and a lot of the ethnic pieces he can kind of relate to, even though his mom grew up here and he was born here. His dad is Italian and English. That's where the Peck comes from, the English piece. But again, he grew up Catholic, so every once in a while he'll go and take the kids and do a Sunday mass, especially like for major holidays. And it made me, I've had to think about, wow, that conversation with my parents. And I really knew before that conversation how they felt about my relationship. It wasn't like they had to take me out to Wood Ranch to have it. Like I knew that it was going to be a big deal if I went that way. And it's so interesting that I chose 2 men that were that kind of umbrella, different from one another in some major ways, but not that different. So all that to say is I've seen a lot of people within intercultural relationships. If you're a woman of color, your parents might not mind, your community might not mind if you date up or marry up, which usually means a white guy. If you marry someone white, it's perceived as a lot more palatable than choosing, for example, someone that's like lower than you, right? And I think the worst case scenario, because there's so much anti-Black sentiment in a lot of immigrant households, my parents were also like, and never in a million years could you be somebody Black.
I'm gonna be for real with you right now. I know that guy you're talking about. I know that I know he was Black. It's fine. You don't want to say it. I know he was. It's fine.
Yeah, he was Iranian. Sure,
he was Iranian, but girl, he was Black as hell.
Hey, I've been with a lot of Iranian women myself.
That motherfucker was straight from Africa. I'm joking, but I'm thinking of when you were saying all that, I'm like, yep. Yeah. Because we act like we can't be racist, people of color. We are racist as shit. And yeah, it's anti-Black, it's anti-color, right? Brown, right? But like, man, sometimes it ain't just white folk. I think a lot of people lose that in translation, man. It's a lot of us that hate a lot of other races. I know a lot of Arabs shit on a lot of other Arabs, right? I mean, I've had to work with clients. They're like, yeah, man, I can't date them. I said, why not? Because they're just a poor dog race. I'm like, holy shit. What race was it?
I'm very clear on it now. As I say anti-Black sentiment or anti-Arab, or I say socioeconomic, isms, or because I do truly believe that you can only be racist. Racism has to have power. And so when you've got 2 groups that don't have power, I call it anti-Black sentiment. I call it internalized racism, because you really can't be racist if you don't have the power. So I think that I reserve racism for you have to have some kind of power when it comes to race.
I like that.
Then you've got white supremacies. But then I talk about there's anti-Black sentiment, there is socioeconomic and education and prestige discrimination, where if somebody doesn't have those degrees, if somebody doesn't, colorism, those things, absolutely, I call that what it is, but I do reserve racism for, okay, you've got to have the power. So I don't think that, I can't be racist, but I absolutely have isms. I absolutely have different biases, anti-Black sentiment. That I think is absolutely rampant in the immigrant mentality. And the education piece is huge, especially within Middle Eastern communities. It's like, if you're not educated, that looking down on the socioeconomic piece or the education piece is like, what do they do? You can't be with someone who's a carpenter. Jesus was a carpenter. You can't be with someone who's a carpenter or a woodworker. You've got to be with a doctor.
But all these people fucking think Jesus was white, blonde hair, blue eyes. So, right, I mean, God forbid, he is Arab as shit or Black. Let's be real.
It's from Palestine, people, do research. But, okay. So that's one little piece.
I can't remember that race, my boy. I think it was Afghani. That they were like, yeah, it's just dirt poor. And then he was, I think it was Saudi Arabian. And he's like, yeah, no, that's below our culture. And it was all about how do we work with him and his family, because he loved his woman. and he was going to break up, whether or not break up. And it was a long, I mean, we're talking about like 6 months. We had to work on this leading up to showing her to the family, which is the siblings first, and they approved. And then the dad was like, oh no, she's cool. He's like, but don't you hate these people? What about society? That's all I ever hear is society. And all the races and international folks I worked with says, what will society think? Like, who the fuck is society? Do you love her? First time you've ever felt love? Yes. I said, well, when we moving forward and we need to talk to your dad. He said, no. Okay, well, I'll see you next week. Give me my $125.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
It's a quintessential, but what will people say? You know, that's the piece of it, is what will this look like? And that's part of a survival mindset. Again, if you're constantly thinking, not marriage for love, that's privilege, marriage for survival. Is this from a family of people that we can use to elevate ourselves in society, somehow survive? You're talking survival by connecting, often through marriage, in that way. And so I think that is, again, some of that mentality, not to say you've got to live your life that way, but it does dictate how you have conversations with your parents, because it's a difference of, all that matters for me is this, and the parent is like, I'm coming from a completely different mindset, versus sitting down with your parent and saying, look, I know you had to make some decisions about what you did and who you loved and who you were even friends with in order to survive. You've given me that. I don't have to make that. And look at the things we're doing. We are thinking about our financial future. We are thinking about When you can talk like that with your parent, in the end, you might get married to whoever you're going to get married to anyway. But you were saying something, Nas, like the dynamic is different. How you communicate with them is different. And the how kind of changes everything. So I think in my example, it was like, I think my family was okay as long as my partner's cultural background was not a threat.
Yeah.
And my dad, still to this day, even though my husband is like American. Yes, there are these Italian pieces to it, and he did travel to Italy, but the Italians assimilated very easily.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
White. And so
they're white
my
as hell.
dad will
They're all Republicans now.
Totally. And my dad will play up like he is Italian American, and he's asked him about 50 million times whether he speaks Italian. I'm like, Dad, he's just a white guy. Like, he doesn't speak
He's just a white guy.
No?
He's just a basic white guy, Dad.
Yeah,
Jesus.
He hates the blacks too, okay? Is that what you want, Dad? Okay?
He's anti-black, all right? It's all right. God.
Pause. I need to ask something. The tall white guy, the first marriage, what was his job? Occupation?
He was in IT. He did
IT. Okay. And then what the current partner, right? What's his occupation?
He's in sales. He does like general sales.
So he's not like a doctor, an engineer, or something like that. The reason why I ask is because, right, this is what they program us immigrants. You may be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, right? Someone, a political influence. I don't know why I'm making these faces.
I was going to say, who's this immigrant accent you're doing?
I know. I feel like I'm going for Robert Downey, or not Robert Downey.
Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro. Yeah. Whenever I make this face, that's
Fredo, my son.
Huh?
Where's your mole at?
My daughter's not a hua, okay?
Oh my God. What is that?
I don't know, man.
You're so bad.
I've gone full autistic. Okay.
That's a really bad thing. I don't know what kind of bad thing.
I must have not taken my pills today.
That's the reason.
Yeah, I ran out of the butt ones, so.
Oh my God.
All right, we're pivoting. I just wanted, again, put context on things because occupation and race do mean a lot of things. Right? It's all joking and satire, but there's real stuff on why I ask these questions always.
And color. I think if this person were another immigrant from a group outside of my own background, then those things would become even more important. But you bring in, like, it's a joke, but also you bring in a basic white guy, he's already going to have a million different privileged associations, even if he doesn't have that. Now, my husband went to business school, is a wonderful person, is starting a school. Like, I absolutely adore him, but he didn't have to try as hard as my first boyfriend ever, who was Mexican and was getting peppered with all those questions, you know? So like, I think that it really does matter when you've got, and again, if you've got a light-skinned Mexican from a really, privileged family, financially well off, now it's going to be a whole different story. But I really see a lot of people in intercultural relationships, the hardest struggles are when your family perceives you to have married down or disgraced them with that choice versus elevated themselves, because it cuts at some of the deep colorism and kind of anti fill in the blank sentiment. Plus, it also hits at their survival mechanisms and really makes them kind of jump in with this urgency and almost like fury to try and get you not to make that decision, because their nervous system is like, that's impending doom. And you're like, no, it's not the same situation. This is not going to be. And then I also like to remind people when I work with Armenian clients, the Armenian genocide,
Yeah.
really, when you have come from a people who have been genocided, you've got to think about how your blood, and even even those that are part of the African diaspora, right, and brought over by chattel slavery, is like the one drop rule. Like, your blood, your ethnicity, it matters for life or for death. And these things get encoded again in the intergenerational dynamics at play. They get encoded. And so sometimes your family is reacting from that place of having had race, bloodline, and those pieces really matter. And they can come in like that with that fight or flight response, even though you're just dating somebody who practices a different religion. And you're like, it's not that serious. And for them, they might not cognitively understand why it is that serious, but they're acting as if it's as life or death, because maybe you look at that lineage and you see why those things had such a big impact and maybe were life or death before. We know lots of stories of, Black men that were lynched for even
White women
supposedly looking in the way of a white woman. We're not that far off from that history to then have people that say, oh my gosh, you're going to marry this? Why would you do that? Or why would you bring kids into this context? And so sometimes it's recognizing that those kinds of dynamics and histories are part of why families disapprove of certain things, and conversely why they approve of certain marriages, even when you're not dating or connected to someone from your same background. And it's always interesting to kind of pick that apart and see what's going on.
Anything else, Spence?
No, I think Pauline said it great. I mean, white is always right.
Oh my God. Hey.
You know what I'm saying, Pauline? Hey.
You know what? You know how to vote this year, Pauline. You know where to vote,
Hey.
That's all satire, people.
It's a joke.
All satire.
It's a joke. I'm black too. It's fine.
So we'll make a quick pivot and then we can get out of here today. So you can answer either one. Is we can go back into the comedy that I said earlier when it comes to religion and discerning out, and how did you deal with that? Not your parents, you. Because we've done a lot about you talking about others and all the trauma and all the shit. But I want to actually talk about you. How have you dealt with your journey? And did it cause you to make choices that you didn't want to make? And you went into therapy. You and your clients are replicas of each other because your lived experience is quite the same. So how the hell did you survive? And what did you do? How did it affect you? We know your rise to the awesome, intelligent, charismatic, resilient, and happy and awesome personality woman that you are now. But what was that getting to that? Because that shit wasn't always happy. And I know that. I'm a therapist now. I know a thing or two, Could you explain that for us? Because all those things that you talked about most likely made you dislike many parts of yourself or your parents, which had to have impacted your friendships and relationships.
Yeah. I am kind of coined as somebody who helps people not cut off their family and figure out other ways. And people always assume
my favorite
that
thing.
it's because yeah, exactly. People always assume it's because I've never considered cutting them off. And that's the funniest piece, because I have absolutely gotten there at so many different times in my life, and especially around right before kind of my mom's death in early college. My mom died early grad school. So, the conflicts with my parents were repeated and chronic, and were one of the main sources of just distress in my life. And they cause, when you've got that family conflict, you said it so beautifully earlier, Dr. Naz, is like when you have that family conflict, it impacts every intimate relationship, including the intimate relationship with yourself. So choices that I made where I wasn't honoring myself, I wasn't treating myself really well, even in terms of like self-care and not abusing my body, right? Giving it sleep, giving it water, not, like treating it well, even just the basics of that. I definitely did not have because I didn't feel like I had that worthiness because of those conflicts with my family and feeling othered. When you come from a very religious family and you're taught that goodness is tied to religiosity, and then you're turning your back on that, and your family is like, you're literally choosing to then condemn yourself to hell, and you're trying to contend with that as a young person. I mean, that can feel,
Fuck
at the
you
one
up.
hand, you feel like, oh, this is so good. Like the sinful life, I get to do whatever I want. And on the other hand, you got like a deep seated guilt and shame that
Yep.
follows you in every aspect of what you're doing. And somebody that feels deep guilt and shame makes those shortcut decisions, is not making grounded, wise,
Yes.
good decisions, is not nourishing themselves, because ultimately, when you're treated that way, you feel less than. And when you feel unworthy, then you treat yourself as unworthy. You get into relationships that are distressing. You get into relationships that are not healthy. You treat yourself in an unhealthy way. So, people think, oh, you must have come from a really great family. And I'm like, yes, I do absolutely think in so many ways my family is
Yep.
wonderful and great. Like I can hold that. And I also have a ton of different privileges in terms of not having experienced a lot of things that I see and work with on a clinical place, but I absolutely struggled with my own
Stuff.
internal dialogue, my own stuff, like body image stuff, just hating myself and feeling like I was trying to pretend like I liked myself. But deep down, right underneath that surface, was someone that just felt really unworthy, felt like I'm other, I'm less than. I felt like I brought shame to my family, and my family had my dad's not just a pastor. The Yeghnazar family is like a internationally known family. My
Oh.
grandfather, my dad's dad, brought the Assemblies of God slash spirit-filled evangelistic Christianity to Iran, him and his cousin. So they grandfathered so many different ministers that are around the world. And both of my dad's brothers, he's got there were 6 siblings, one died. Both of my dad's brothers have international ministries. So does my dad. My sister is in ministry full time. And so, these words might not mean anything to you if you're not from like a born again Christian background, but they mean shit. Like it means stuff. My family is like a big name. Even today, guys, even today on Instagram, I have that dialogue of how it's gonna, but what will people say? I think
Correct.
about the church background. I think about the community.
Yep.
My dad watches my videos. I don't know how deeply he's a quick scroller, so I don't know, but he watches a lot of my videos. The other day he was like, it was a while back actually, but he said, do that thing, tell that story of like how I bring you stuff and you don't like to eat it and you choose your battles. Like do that thing that you did on TV. And I was like, you mean my Instagram? It wasn't TV, Dad. It was Instagram. He's like, yeah, tell that funny story. And I'm like, Dad, don't watch my Instagram.
Yeah. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this fucking podcast. Jesus.
Yeah, no.
Sorry, Pauline's dead.
Yeah, I don't think he's like figured out the podcast thing.
Oh, thank
but
God.
I always am thinking about that. People think I've gotten to this, like you get to this place where you have it all figured out or nothing gets to you. It doesn't get to me in the sense that I'm in a bad relationship with myself. I'm not in a bad relationship with others. My life is generally peaceful, even the distress. And I try to really normalize putting it out there. Like I show people that I'm distressed. I tell them what I'm struggling with. My content, I strive to make it very real, but I'm not distressed at my mess because honestly, I'm a very, there's like a hot mess. I'm a clean mess. Like I don't have that much mess, because I dealt with a lot of that.
She's a
But my
white people mess. It's clean, it's vanilla. Nas, I married up, Nas. Oh, well, fuck you then. I actually don't like you after this, and your fucking Satanism.
So much immigrant Satanism. That's what we call it.
I love you. I love you.
Yes,
oh my
yes.
gosh, that is so good, right? That is just so good. But I've dealt with that stuff, right? And not that it ever goes completely away, but it's just not the same anymore. I'm
Yeah.
not struggling in the same realm, but there are those little tendrils where I don't forget that I went through that. That is a part of my story. I will never not talk about those things
Correct.
because I think it normalizes. It's kind of like there was nothing that special about me. This is the impact of living in the multicultural world, having those religious pieces at play, breaking, like these are things that put anybody in this situation, you're going to have some commonality. So I try to show people it's not that I'm special and you have to go get a PhD to figure it out. It's
Yes.
that these are the experiences, and by
Okay.
making sense of them and having the cultural piece, I've been able to write that into my narrative in a way where I don't have to suffer the same suffering again just to be able to have that be a part of my story. And so there's new struggles that I have. I'm a parent, I struggle in that piece and, how to maintain the intimacy with your partner after having kids. I struggle with how much of hustle culture I've incorporated. I'm here doing a podcast on a freaking Sunday rather than spending time with my family. Like,
Hey
that
man,
kind of
we're, we're family now.
Hold
I
on
mean,
now.
them kids
Hey.
hate you. Let's be real. They don't need you.
God. All right.
We're trying to spice.
My kids, not yet. They're only almost 4 and 19 months. They are obsessed with me for only a very short period of time.
Oh, you're
They'll
right.
hate me
You're
one
right.
day, but
You're right.
they're not there yet.
Not there yet.
Not there yet.
But
But they
what I
will.
can tell, they'll get there. No, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry.
Dr. Nazir was right, Mom.
So good. My kids will listen to this podcast. My 4-year-old will figure out how to do this.
Yeah, your 4-year-old's not making it to a fucking 2-hour podcast. I'll tell you that. We gotta wrap it up, bro. I'm tired. This is magnificent.
Yes, this was fantastic. Thank you so much, Pauline. Can we have some, can you give us some, what you're going on, what you up to, some plugs for us and yourself?
What do you want to promote?
Yes.
Yeah. So my kind of bread and butter is find me on Instagram. It's a resource for you. Pauline the Psychologist. It's a place that is my free love letter to the daughters of immigrants, just normalizing and talking about the things that maybe you, again, have thought were a you problem. And then you see thousands of other women that are a part of that. And then the signature program that I have is a coaching program that I've developed for the daughters of immigrants. I only have a small little caseload, and first place, I'm kind of saying it publicly, but by the end of the year, I'm going to be moving out of providing direct therapy care anyway. I've been doing this for 14 years. I'm ready to kind of do something a little different.
Right.
I'm still going to be running a group practice. So I took on new people. If you're in California or New York, Noor and my associates at Noor would be happy to provide you culturally informed, trauma-informed care. And we have a bunch of different really exciting specialty areas based on the unique individuals that I've taken on.
Okay.
But the coaching stuff, which was my side gig, has just grown in that I'm able to work with women all across the world. And I have 2 formats. So I have an individual program, just me and the person. It's called the Culture and Connection Program. And I've worked with women all over. And it's basically like the toolkit that you would want every daughter of immigrant to have. And so we started looking at the intergenerational piece. Then we look at childhood. Then we do the relationship with yourself. And finally, we do the relationship with other people. And so I've kind of created, it's almost like a course and a live experience with me. And you've got the individual piece, and then you've got the group piece. And so the group piece is getting the daughters of immigrants together to do basically that same format, but in the group setting. And I ran it once in March, and it was just so wonderful. And I still think about these women today, and I'm hoping to gear up to run one before the end of this year. So that's something I'm actively getting people involved in. So if you live anywhere in the world, and that's the therapy piece is, you have to be in the same state, and the person has to be seeing blah, 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 and the price has to be right. Whereas coaching, I work with women all around the world. It's a month-long program. The individual, like I said, is Culture and Connection. The group is Roots and Fruits. And I'm hoping that we get another group together before the end of the year. So those are my biggest plugs. I always try to be accessible because the programs are a higher investment, but I've got the free translation guide. I've got a free book club that I run. I've got over 1,000 people that are a part of it now. And it just grew from me being on maternity leave and wanting to read books and thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? I have a newborn baby. And also I need some accountability because, I've got these books piling up. I'm not reading them. And I started the book club. It was over a year ago. And, thousands of people have said, I'm into this. And so that's a free resource for people. And I try to put as much free content out there for people so that they can do that, even the work of education, without having to pay anything. And then if you want to have me guide you through the process, I've got that individual and the group piece. And if you want traditional therapy, that's not mired in white supremacy, and you live in California or New York, that's where Noor would come in. So that's a little bit of all the things I've got going on. And in January, I'm going to be making an announcement with some additional exciting things that I'm doing as I pivot away from the therapy world and get into other kinds of community building, public facing sorts of
Stuff.
offers for people.
There you go.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. And everyone, be sure to update and check out Pauline's stuff. We'll be updating you, and hopefully we'll have you back sometime. You're a great guest. So
Well, she's gonna be famous then, so she probably won't like us, you know.
who are you?
Yeah.
What? did 2 hours with a podcast. What?
She's gonna be like this side or this side. What color? You know what? You're the light skin.
Black hand side. Okay.
Okay. I'm joking.
Anyways, thank you, everybody.
How could I forget you two after this? This was kind of unforgettable. You know?
We like to sear ourselves in our guest minds, so it's always there,
like a good
always
steak.
there.
We like to. We like to.
Like a good hearing, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So,
hey, one last joke. When she's like, "It's called fruits and roots," I was like, "I got a couple fruits for you."
oh my God.
Let's do it right here. All right, let's get out of the show.
Hey, everybody. All right, I'm Spencer. That's the Different Spectrum Podcast. Bye.
That's the show. I want to give a shout out to my son who made this necklace for me for Mother's Day. Just wanted to let him know, since he's listening to the podcast 3 hours in. He's not. He's 4 years old.
Damn.
He won't even be, but I just had to say it because I wanted to wear it today as we were talking about being a parent.
It's pretty.
Having kids. I thought about it. I was like, yeah, he made me this necklace. He said, because purple is my favorite color. I cried like a little baby myself. You know, purple's your favorite color?
Yep.
Nobility and wisdom and all
I'm a Vikings fan, so purple is always in my life.
Yep.
So no matter what. So,
Purple.
there
This
it
is
is.
purple, you know.
All
Yeah,
right.
no, it's nice. Yeah, hell, when I was that young, I think I was still like peeing on the wall. I don't think I was doing much.
You're still peeing on the wall.
Okay.
What the hell?
You're still peeing on the wall. Okay.
Yeah, just outside, you know?
Yeah.
He's on
Yeah.
trees.
He's
and all-
artistic though when he's peeing on the wall. You
Yeah.
know,
It's like
a
Big
good
Daddy.
distraction.
You know, I learned. You know. All right, let's get out of here.
All right, Spencer, Naz.
I don't know how we got here, but here we are.
That's the
People had
podcast.
fun. They never know where we're going to go. So this is, you two are kind of a tremendous influence. If I hang out with the two of you too much, I'm going to start having all this stuff. This is great.
Oh no, if you hang out with us, for one, you're gonna have a good time.
Yeah.
And I mean, afterwards, we're probably gonna eat. So I'm sorry. Your grandma is gonna be like, you're either really healthy or she can call you really fat if she was still here.
Okay, what are you guys going to eat? What's that next meal going to be? Just to fill me in on that.
I have no idea. I have to see what I got.
I just know that me and him, whenever we hang out, we go and eat. All my best friends, we exercise, we go lift or play basketball, and then we eat. Masculinity is very easy. We're very simple creatures.
All right. We need to actually get the outro here. I'm Spencer. That's Nas, Different Spectrums Podcast.
All right, everyone. Much love and thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you to our guest. Remember, everyone, take care of yourselves.
Or don't.
It's completely up to you.
And we're out of